A potential breakthrough for treating Alzheimer's disease. Apple showing off a lot of new features and updates at its developers conference this week. And the boss is back. And no, we are not talking about Carlo Versano. Tuesday Need to Know. Let's go. Good morning. This is Cheddar's Need to Know podcast. For Tuesday, June 8th, I am Jill Wagner with Baker Machado once again. Hey, Baker.
Happy Tuesday to you, Jill Wagner. How you doing this morning?
It feels like mid-afternoon. A bunch of people who have emailed in to say, I'm used to getting my podcast early in the morning, and it's part of my routine, and we apologize for that.
Oh, yeah. That's my fault.
We just have a lot of stuff going on this week with Carlo out, so bear with us.
Yes. And by the way, it's no different. I mean, we're going to talk here in a moment about all the websites being down, this morning because of basically everything coming down. So everybody now experiences what we were going through, where they're getting their news and information much later, like the podcast, much later in the day.
Okay, so just a heads up for anybody who, like me, thought that their internet was broken this morning or just potentially that they were losing their mind. There was actually this major outage at a cloud services company called Fastly. At this point, it's mostly back online, but websites like Amazon, Target, the New York Times, Bloomberg, CNN, not working for a big portion of the morning. So, Baker, you allegedly like to claim that you get up at 3:30 in the morning.
I do.
And you have coffee and read the paper. I'm guessing you read the paper online.
Yes.
So did you notice the outage? And this is how I'm going to know if you are actually telling the truth about your morning routine, because I've always thought it's been nuts.
Okay, so here's the thing. And by the way, it's so funny that I do get up at 3:45 in the morning, given the fact that I live the closest out of all of the anchors to the office here at Cheddar, which is even more hilarious. I didn't experience the outage this morning, Joe, because for the first time I was watching Hulu this morning instead of reading the news because The Bachelorette premiered last night, and I was only able to watch half of it, and I already am madly in love with one of the contestants, so I had to finish it this morning. Greg from New Jersey, if you're listening to the podcast, love you already. He got the first impression rose last night, if you're keeping score, by the way. So anyway, did not experience the outage, but I know that this delayed a little bit of our show today because so many of us and our producers as well couldn't get a lot of news and information today also.
Well, I was writing the newsletter this morning, and I was trying to fact check, and I was going through some articles, and I'm like, what is going on?
Well, the other part
crazy.
That's so funny in this is Twitter was down today. And, if Twitter's down, where are we going to go to complain that the internet is broken if Twitter is down? So some people were able to access Twitter, and they were just complaining about the internet being down. And I just love so much that, the place that most of us go to complain was also down this morning.
Okay, let's start with some news, some actual news. Well, this was actual news. I'm glad we led with it because it probably affected a lot of people. Okay, but Baker, potentially a major breakthrough when it comes to how Alzheimer's treatment. The FDA has approved the first new Alzheimer's medication in nearly 2 decades. It's called Aduhelm. It's a monthly IV infusion. And what's different about this is that it's meant to treat the underlying cause of the disease as opposed to other meds which treat the symptoms. However, this decision is quite controversial and contentious. The FDA's own independent advisory committee, as well as some Alzheimer's researchers, say there's just not enough evidence that the drug actually helps and works. It's going to continue. Biogen is going to continue to undergo clinical trials, though, even after the FDA approved the drug.
All right, Jill, incredible news here. First off, just to say off the top of all this, science is amazing. The fact that we haven't had a breakthrough when it comes to this in decades. So this is incredibly significant that science has been able to figure this out. If this drug is actually successful, what an incredible breakthrough for millions of people who suffer with this horrible, horrible disease. Also, if you're Biogen, the pharma company, this is obviously going to be a financial juggernaut for you already. We're already seeing shares of this company already through the roof as a result of this. But listen, I do have to put put some caveats in all of this. I'm not going to necessarily say it's bad news, but it's definitely things I would couch your excitement on. One, as you mentioned, this drug, a lot of people saying should not be approved. There needs to be more trials in a lot of this as well. And we don't really know at the end of the day if this is an effective treatment based on the clinical trials so far. So again, more research needs to be done in this. The second and the most important part in all of this is going to be the cost. Biogen is essentially saying they're going to charge $56,000 on average per customer, not to mention the tens of thousands of dollars in screening for the drug just to make sure that it even works, that people essentially have to pay for, Jill. So this likely, according to the New York Times, would likely drive up premiums, which would only inflate healthcare costs even more. So right now, Jill, this is a TBD situation, but as we see more patients take this drug and do more trials and research on it, you're going to see more breakthroughs in this. So I want to couch all of that by saying this is an incredible medical breakthrough, and I really hope we have turned a big corner when it comes to the treatment of this horrible disease.
Okay, Baker, on to some politics here. Kamala Harris, Vice President Kamala Harris, headed to Mexico today. Yesterday, she was in Guatemala, and it's her first trip abroad as vice president. The Biden administration is trying to stem this influx of migrants by attacking its root problems, including human trafficking and corruption in Mexico and Central America. They also want to inject $4 billion into Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras to help fight poverty and crime. Kamala Harris trying to discourage migrants from crossing the U.S. southern border, saying, do not come. Do not come. The United States will continue to enforce our laws and secure our border.
Yeah, that do not come statement, obviously important given the fact that Republicans have really hit her and the Biden administration for their stance when it comes to the border. And Joe Biden also heading overseas as well, Jill. He's going to go to the G7 summit. Then next week, he's going to be meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Now, we should note this is Biden's first international trip as president. He also, by the way, I'm excited for this. He's going to meet with Queen Elizabeth, which I'm going to love that story. But obviously, all the attention going to be on his meeting with Vladimir Putin. The focus of that, given the fact the election hacking, stories that have been out there, Putin's prior relationship with former President Donald Trump, the fact that we got no transcripts of that conversation between the two of those leaders. And then also Joe Biden also probably going to likely talk about the ransomware attacks that are happening right now. There's no evidence, according to Joe Biden, the administration, that these are being done by the Kremlin, but there is speculation out there that this is being carried out in Russia, but not by the government. So obviously a lot of questions that Joe Biden will have for Vladimir Putin when it comes to that.
No evidence? I mean, I thought we knew this already. I thought it was like a known thing that Russia was behind all this stuff.
I mean, listen, I'm sure they're couching it for diplomatic reasons. They're saying, obviously, the Russian government is not involved in all of this. But there is evidence to suggest that the hacking is actually taking place in Russia.
Okay, well, speaking of some of the hacking, we've got some positive steps in the fight against cyber criminals and hackers. Feds have seized more than half of that $4.4 million in cryptocurrency ransom that was paid to restore the Colonial Pipeline energy system. You'll remember that was hacked in early May. It sent gas prices through the roof. DOJ officials saying the FBI basically turned the tables on this hacker group called DarkSide, which is believed to be based in Russia. What I found most interesting here, Baker, is that the money was recovered by this newly launched government task force that was created as part of the government's response to the surge in cyber attacks. So basically, they managed to hack the hackers. It's really uncommon for this type of ransom to get paid back. So the question now is this a sign that the U.S. is taking these cyber attacks seriously and finally doing something about it? And is that going to pay off down the line?
Oh, absolutely, Joe. And by the way, the larger big reveal in all of this was that agents were essentially able to access the Bitcoin currency wallet that DarkSide used to get the payment from Colonial Pipeline. That is significant because accessing anybody's sort of crypto payments is sort of counter to what Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies are, because it's untraceable, it's encrypted, it's hard for you to sort of access. And the FBI, by the way, not revealing how they were able to access that crypto wallet. Jill, we're also entering a new territory where things like the power grid, your mass transit systems. So much more could now potentially be used in cyber crimes. Punchbowl News, a Washington-based news organization that I love to follow, reported this morning that a tech vendor that provides constituent outreach services to dozens of House offices was the target of a ransomware attack just this morning, Jill. So Joe Biden, no doubt, has put more pressure on these private companies to really step up their security game, because already you're having Energy Secretary Jennifer Granholm coming out yesterday saying there could be a potential threat here to the power grid. What we saw in Texas just recently with the weather in the power grid, who's not to say that cyber criminals wouldn't be able to access that?
Really scary stuff. Baker, let's talk tech. Apple kicked off its annual developers conference this week, presenting some new software updates and features, including the ability to use your iPhone as your ID at the airport. It's also going to be easier to find missing AirPods in the Find My app. And once you locate them, you can actually activate Conversation Boost, which isolates the voice of the person in front of you. FaceTime also looking a lot more like Zoom and Microsoft Teams. Okay, Baker, what caught your eye here from some of these announcements?
My goodness, so many big revelations in this, Jill. First off, let's talk about the FaceTime feature, which is really important because Zoom has become such a popular work from home platform for so many people. And the fact that you could only access FaceTime if you were an Apple product user is significant now that anybody, an Android device, your Chrome browser, any of that can now get on that same FaceTime with you. Also, by the way, now you can do watching Disney Plus, Hulu, HBO Max, within FaceTime with friends and family, which is going to be great. So you could do watching with other people on FaceTime. One other feature that also really caught my attention, the Do Not Disturb feature is now coming to iMessage, Jill. This essentially will be where your contacts, if you're sending a text message to somebody, they will essentially be notified in that text message that the other person has enabled their Do Not Disturb message. So that way they're already alerted that you're likely not going to respond to that text message, which is pretty impressive. Also, you mentioned the AirPods feature. This is significant for me because I lose my AirPods on a weekly basis. Now, essentially, you can ping those AirPods directly, so a much needed update there. But the feature, obviously, that's getting a lot of attention and a lot of talk right now is and privacy watchers are freaking out about this as well, is that new ID feature, where essentially your driver's license will now be in your phone, in your iPhone wallet. And they already have a partnership, Apple does, with TSA. So that way you can now scan this instead of showing your ID when you go to check in at the airport. Obviously, a lot of people are nervous about the privacy concerns on this, but Apple has really promoted themselves as a privacy and security company out there. So if any company maybe would be able to pull this off, it might be Apple.
I also am really interested in this idea of that FaceTime is getting more similar to Zoom and Microsoft Teams. So people can schedule calls, and they're even giving access to people who have Google Android devices and Microsoft Windows. They're trying to make the audio better, so it sounds like whomever you're talking to is actually in the same room as you. And I guess it's just this acknowledgement that this is how people are going to be doing meetings. Even when we go back to the office or do more in-person stuff, video calls and having a video component to things not going away. It feels like that's what they're trying to tap into here.
Absolutely, Jill. And if anything, look, FaceTime changed the game. Remember how revolutionary of a product FaceTime was when it first came out. The fact that you could have a video call with somebody on your phone, that was something that was unheard of at the time. But Apple never was really able to continue to update that product, and it allowed other people like Zoom and Google and so many others to finally get into the conversation here that FaceTime then was only being used for personal use. You essentially weren't FaceTiming office employees. You weren't FaceTiming to go to a meeting. So now essentially you're adding so many more layers to this that more people can take part in FaceTime. I think this is a much needed update here.
And it's funny because I have thought so many times if I have a call with my boss or even just a call with other coworkers and it's not that many of us, and we get, I get a Microsoft Teams link. I'm thinking, can't we just do this on FaceTime? Or could we just do a conference call? Because it's just, it's not as seamless, I guess, on my iPhone as FaceTime is.
Jill, you're 100% right. And I experienced this a lot during the pandemic when we would want to have these massive Zoom calls. And a lot of us were still trying to figure out how to use the software. That the common complaint was, can't we just do this on FaceTime? Can't all of us just do that? And then we would get into the issue where, no, random cousin does not have an iPhone, so we can't do this. So yes, I'm very happy for this upgrade because that was much needed for a lot of us that use FaceTime.
Amazon founder Jeff Bezos says he's going to join crew members of his Blue Origin space company on July 20th as they make their first flight to space with passengers on board. His brother Mark also joining him, along with the winner of an online charity auction. The Bezos brothers and their fellow travelers are going to be taking a 10-minute flight up to an altitude of about 65 miles. They're going to skim the edge of space before returning to Earth. Bezos is stepping down, by the way, as Amazon CEO just 15 days before liftoff. The joke from one of our OG joke writers at Need to Know is that he's going to be delivered back the next day via Prime for the small price of $119 or $13 a month.
By the way, interesting. I just looked just a few moments ago. The price, by the way, for this contest for you to be on this with Jeff Bezos and his brother is now at $3 million right now, Jill. So this is essentially, and as you mentioned, this is a very short trip. You're only in for a couple minutes in outer space before you come back down. So you're essentially paying like $1 million almost a minute to be jettisoned out into space with Jeff Bezos. But also on the Amazon beat, this is interesting, Jill, for a lot of us that have Amazon Echo, Tile, or Ring devices. They might start sharing your internet bandwidth with your neighbors and even potentially strangers. Any sidewalk-enabled device apparently will connect with other enabled devices within range, even if they're not in your home. This would essentially allow every device in the network to remain connected to the internet, even if your house loses its internet connection to your home Wi-Fi network. Now, Amazon's telling developers to enable the sidewalk in third-party devices. That way, you essentially would create a larger network as a result of this. But some experts, and especially those that are concerned about privacy, are advising people, Jill, to do your research before you enable this and potentially disable sidewalk on your devices if you're concerned about this.
It's one of these things that you're like, what could possibly go wrong with sharing the Wi-Fi with anybody who's within range of your devices?
Jill, first it was sharing a cup of sugar with your next door neighbor. Now you're giving them your Wi-Fi password. I mean, my God, your neighbors, all of our neighbors are basically be so much more ingrained in our lives. And I understand why Amazon wants you to do this. I mean, this essentially, think of how many times, Jill, we've lost power. You know, you living in Long Island, when things go bad, sometimes you lose power. Essentially, now you'll be able to connect on Wi-Fi and keep those things still running. But look, from a privacy perspective, I 100% understand why people will be very skeptical of this.
It's so funny you say that about sugar. So we moved into our house. We're in a new house that we moved into in September. And I kept saying to my husband, I'm like, no one's come over with a basket, with a welcome package.
Whatever happened to
the
those
neighborhood?
Days? Yeah.
And it's so the a house nearby just sold, and I think some new people are moving in, and we're like, should we go over with a basket?
I mean, if nobody's doing it, you should start the trend. You should be the first ones in the neighborhood to be like, hello, this is the proper way to do things. Here, but it's funny because in New York, in the city, you would never do that in an apartment complex. Like nobody even acknowledges the existence of your neighbors in your apartment complex. Like you try as much as you can in New York City to avoid your neighbors at all costs, let alone asking for a cup of sugar.
Oh, no, actually, I was lucky because when I lived in the city, I always got friendly actually with neighbors, at least the people who were on my hallway. So I will say, I think I lucked out.
You're better than me, Jill. This has happened to me 2 times. I've been in the elevator with my husband and somebody else, and I will politely say to that other person, "What floor are you?" And then my husband will look at me and he'll say, "They're our next door neighbors." And
that's so funny, Baker. And that's something I would do as well. And with masks, forget it.
Even with good luck.
And okay, The Boss making his Broadway return. Bruce Springsteen's one-man show, Springsteen on Broadway, back for a limited run. The show will be one of the first productions in New York City's theater district to reopen since the pandemic, of course, shut down performances. It's launching at the St. James Theater on June 26th, which is pretty soon, and it's going to run through September. Audience members will have to provide proof of full vaccination in order to enter. The boss, Baker's still going strong. He's 71 years old. Now, this makes a whole lot of sense to me because Bruce Springsteen lives to perform. So that's number one. But it's a one-man show. I think his wife comes up at one point. But it's not like they've got the whole cast that they need to worry about coordinating the safety and stuff. So it makes a lot of sense.
Jill, this is not Cats and Rent where you essentially have to have a full ensemble of characters, costumes, everything. You're right. It is a one-man show. And by the way, this is one of the biggest and best one-man shows. We were laughing earlier today on Wake Up with Cheddar. My aunt, who is an insane, crazy Bruce Springsteen fan, she comes once a year to New York City only to watch the Bruce Springsteen show on Broadway. She'll be like, oh yeah, by the way, maybe I have time for lunch or something like that, but I'm very busy. And she is such an insane Springsteen fan. She waits outside after the show is over, in the side alleys where all the other fans basically get together and congregate, waiting for the boss to leave so that way she could try to snap a photo with him.
I love it.
So she's insane, but to the earlier thing you mentioned, Broadway is coming back. I mean, this is amazing. Broadway, by the way, the shows are not coming back until September. But if any show is going to be able to come back and do this, it's this, because you essentially don't have this large, production to put this on. And if one person is essentially doing all of this, Bruce Springsteen, you can do this. And this also goes to show, Jill, how much and how fast things have gotten better here in New York City. I mean, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo is essentially already saying in the next 8 days, we're going to reach 70% vaccine, a 70% vaccine rate here in this state.
I love it. I think I need to meet your aunt because she sounds perfect. I love it.
She sounds better to take than your husband, who eats pretzels in these performances.
Okay, well, we don't have that much time, but the very quick story that I was telling on Wake Up with Cheddar is that if you go to a Bruce Springsteen show, which I've been to a bunch of them, it's loud, it's crazy, it's a concert, you can do whatever the heck you want. When you go to see this one-man show on Broadway, it's quiet.
Right.
He's telling a lot of stories. I mean, you could literally hear a pin drop. And I dragged my husband with me because I'm a Bruce fan, and I'm like, please come with me. I want to go see the show. So he's like, fine. Meanwhile, he's stocking up on pretzels and soda and this and that. Again, you could hear a pin drop, and my husband's crunching on pretzels, and I see everyone looking around, going, "Who is that? Who is crunching?" Unless it was just me being paranoid, and he eventually he turned to me. He's like, "Leave me the heck alone." He's like, "Stop, enjoy the show. Why are you so focused on me?"
I mean, listen, I would be in the same boat as you if my husband was eating chips or anything that had a crunch on it. I'd be like, listen, you're only having water, and that is all that you're having in this thing, because I don't want anybody to know that I'm with you whatsoever.
All right, well, Baker, we're going to leave it there. That is what you need to know for Tuesday, June 8th. Always so fun, Baker.